Friends, welcome back for another exciting session on Arthashastra Talks. We are fortunate today to have with us Shailesh Raj Bhan, who is a Deputy CIO and who manages 3 mega funds for Nippon AMC. Shailesh has been with us erstwhile Reliance and now with Nippon since last 15 years. And his forte being research and conviction-based investing. Welcome, Shailesh ji.
Thank you.
Arthashastra Talks, Shailesh ji, is a simple initiative by Team Arthashastra to educate our investors by talking to the wizards of the industry so that we put across their thoughts, your thoughts to them and their thoughts to you, and so that investors can take more informed investing decisions. Shailesh ji, today we are going to talk about the changing landscape of India, and I have highly regarded you as for your independent thoughts on this subject. India is definitely changing, but also there is a change in management at your end too, previously as Reliance and now as Nippon. You manage one of the highest equity assets in the industry. So, can you now share some insights on your investment and risk management process, especially highlighting the changes post-transition to Nippon?
So it's been a very interesting journey over the years in terms of obviously as a country also a lot of things have changed and changed materially, right? And we've seen larger events happening, GST, IBC, RERA, and all these larger aspects have happened, and they've created a platform for very good growth from the country. So it's in that context a very large, meaningful shift in the environment which is there. In the case of Nippon, we have been focused on high conviction investing backed by solid processes. So our attempt has always been to see that what kind of risk you're taking. See, in equities you can't make money without taking risk. So internally our thought on risk is, are we taking the right relevant risk? And is that risk relevant from the point of the reward that particular investment decision can end up with? So while balancing this, keeping portfolios diversified, taking medium-term calls, avoiding very short-term calls, taking medium-term calls based on really backed by fundamental research is what I would say is a solid background to any investment approach, and that's been our process. Even in terms of risk management, we have added to many new layers, like for example, the kind of analysis which we do in terms of factor analysis, what deviations are we taking from benchmark, and are they very significant to cause dilution in our returns or impact returns of our investors over periods of time. So the idea is to balance both risk and returns in the portfolio to be able to really be able to, I would say, right size the equity environment and deliver returns depending on the strategy we follow.
Great. Shailesh ji, in our last meeting, you had spoken a lot about changing landscapes in India. To start with, broadly, what are the real changes and what do you see? What are those?
I think if you just compress the last 5-7 years in terms of the kind of reforms which have happened in India, it's unbelievable. So we have really cut into every single problem area and tried to correct it. GST, one of the biggest reforms that we have seen impacting $200-300 billion of revenues in the country, I think is a very large material reform, and results are already visible. Then we did RERA, one of the largest sectors in India in terms of the real estate side, which has got impacted by it initially, but now is given a lot of confidence for people to come back and buy. Hence you can see that sector is already roaring and back into action. Then you had the bankruptcy code. So most of the non-performing assets of India are now getting cleaned up via the bankruptcy code program, which actually was non-existent in India before. Virtually it was a very different format. And this is again very big because it impacts again some billions of dollars of this thing. So likewise, reform by reform has come about, and all this has coincided with a weak global environment at some point of time. So you had some pressure in earnings in the last 3-4 years, and COVID came, that also impacted some earnings. But now with all these 4-5 levers into play, all these reforms in play, I think directionally you are finding ease of doing business generally getting much better than what it used to be before. Certainty in business getting much better in terms of at least the policy framework, taxation, and the hence the opportunity available to capitalize on that remains with all the large companies which are there. Another interesting thing is during this phase, like the country corrected itself by doing large reforms, companies also corrected themselves materially.
Wow.
So we sit with very low debt on balance sheets of our largest of the corporates. So if there is a revival of the investment opportunity as we foresee, I think it could well be a meaningful investment cycle we will enter, maybe somewhat similar to the 2003 to 7 we have seen.
Oh, wow.
So that is one large opportunity in front of us. Then you have got the specific programs like production linked incentives, which says that effectively आप capacity create कीजिए, आपको जितना आप volume करोगे, turnover करेंगे, उतना आपको margin मिलेगा, उतना आपको benefit मिलेगा. All this means you are getting slowly very competitive to in some pockets to China or some other markets where you can actually then supply globally. Plus local manufacturing you can do. All of us learned from COVID, right? The challenges which are there to keep supply chain close to you. So I think that is what is also working. So many things working together for India, and this I think creates a platform for maybe less frictionless growth in the next few years.
Great. Shailesh ji, you spoke about low debt. So we are today in a unique situation where banks are flush with funds, means banks' balance sheets are as clean as never before, means at least till my memory serves me right. And corporate debt is at the lowest. I think we are at the 25-year low debt to mortgage or debt to GDP number. So where do you actually see, or where do you see the capex cycle starting or kicking up? So
the most important point you mentioned is banks are in a state and willingness to lend.
yes.
No capex can happen without the availability of capital, and especially larger capital. And if it happens at reasonable rates, it is the best thing to happen in the sense the cost of capital is low. India's capex cycle, though supported by strong balance sheets of banks and corporates, I think the primary thing is many large factors are now working. Utilization rates have moved up.
Yes.
You need the supply chain closer to you.
Yes.
Because of the COVID problems, which taught us that having far away supply chains for everybody in the world is a problem. So that Atmanirbhar effort, which is to make everything in India for locally, that's a big thing.
Yes.
The other initiative is like everybody wants an alternative to China, at least in some pockets or some critical products, and where India can actually be a supplier. So
China
that is one China plus one approach, which as you all call it. So many things which were under invested in India in the last 10 years are starting to invest. If you look at it 3 years back, I remember people used to talk about the fact that there's no investment coming. Today there is clearly, you can see it in order books of engineering businesses. They are all growing very substantially.
That's a good.
And I think this cycle is started in our opinion. So unless there is some very big collapse globally or some event which is beyond control, I think this seems to be a sweet spot from a capex point of view in India.
Very nice. शैलेश जी, सब लोग आपने भी मेंशन किया PLI. सो खासकर हमारे इन्वेस्टर्स के लिए कैन यू एक्सप्लेन व्हाट इज़ PLI, और उसको अगर ब्रीफ में अगर आप एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं. इट इज़ गोइंग टू हेल्प द मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर, इट इज़ सेड, एंड हाउ एक्चुअली एक बात है इंडिया में ये स्कीम्स आ जाती हैं, मगर हाउ सस्टेनेबल दिस PLI scheme could be.
Earlier, if you had seen, the benefits for investment were given generally in low taxation, in the sense you would have to pay lower taxes for new capacity. This time जो investment का benefit दे रही है government, it is production linked. आप इतना produce करिए, excess of what you are producing, उस पे आप benefit ले जाइए. So this is driving to say that boss, अगर आप इतना volume करें इंडिया में, तो आपको margin ज़्यादा मिलेगा, आपको incentive ज़्यादा मिलेगा. So that leads to much larger investments
and competition.
And internationally, even we are seeing even larger international companies wanting to participate in this for especially large projects. This incentive is very important and very essential, primarily because अगर आप देखेंगे कि India had some disadvantages, थोड़ा logistics costs are higher in India. India का size of the market in terms of saying कि आज के दिन जो scale है खाली domestic बेचने के लिए, that is a little lesser than what it should ideally be, what is there in competing countries. तो ये सब को आपको disadvantages को negate करने के लिए आपको ये incentives दिए जा रहे हैं. Using these incentives, you can do significantly in electronics. It's happening. Import substitution बहुत significantly हो रहा है because of all these projects which are underway. And if you are, and this is targeted, so it is very specific that this is in one area where we are weak. तो वो specific area के लिए areas को target करके दे रहा है. So it's a well-designed program, And more importantly, since it says कि आपको 1 साल में इतना turnover करना है, 2 साल में इतना करना है, तो ही मिलेगा. Is also an incentive for the corporate not to take it and keep. They have to keep executing to grow. So I think it is, in a way, driving growth, or can drive growth, can drive import substitution, foreign exchange savings, can drive exports, effective costs will come down. So it's like it's a very positive policy environment for that.
Great. In the backdrop of PLI, I think manufacturing will be shifting. So manufacturing, which was not the forte of India, we could be shifting in that sector. What's your view on transport? Because transport and logistic infrastructure, as logistic infrastructure is imperative pillar for playing an important role in the growth or helping the manufacturing prosper. So is there, especially we are hearing a lot about Bharatmala, Sagarmala, and so what are those things which are being worked on?
Like you said, transport and logistics are really the key from how the economy functions on a frictionless basis, what scale it has, and it has big advantages. I think the biggest change which has happened is that when you implemented GST, right, it made things very simpler on the logistics sides also.
Wow.
Because, each state had a separate taxation. So you had toll nakas at every state. Transfers were a challenge because duties were different and things like that. Now, since it is generally closer to one nation as it can be, I think we are finding that the ease of transportation and logistics has improved materially. Second, you had to have a very inefficient logistic structure before. पहले क्या था, हर एक स्टेट में आपको एक warehouse रखना पड़ता था, because वहाँ का taxation अलग था, so you had to ship from the factory to every state, and वो suboptimal होता था because there is a capacity that can move. Now, post GST, the environment is such that all this suboptimal element is going away. So I am aware of a large number of companies completely redesigning their logistics, which is relevant from their business need rather than taxation need.
Wow.
Which I think is very fundamental from doing business. So इसमें से inefficiencies बहुत कम हो जाएंगे. Turnaround times, like you talked about, the speed at which an average movement happens because of road infrastructure, because of all the other projects you have mentioned which are being tried out. I think that is the speed to destination, I think, is reduced materially. So that is also helping. I think this is one of the most underrepresented sector in India today in the stock markets also. आप देखेंगे logistics का market cap in this sector is hardly anything. So this will become very large. So if there's a sector to bet on in the next 10 years, I think this is one space because everything is working for it. Volumes are rising, import-export is happening, logistics are being redesigned. जैसा BPO हुआ था, ऐसा logistics outsourcing भी हो रहा है. Now you're getting large logistic companies doing everything from supply chain, and the main companies only doing marketing and product development. So this is a start, I think, for this sector. Great.
Shailesh, globally, India is leading in the digital payment mechanism. In the month of July, we did 62.4 crore UPI transactions, amounting to 10.62 lakh crores. What is the importance of this digital transaction? A, to the banks, and B, to the consumers.
If there is anything which is like, where we can clearly say we are cutting edge and leading, it is the payment systems which have been there. So it's like a complete transformation which has happened in the last few years for India. In fact, a lot of countries are now learning the way this is being done, and I think this has changed a lot of operational hassles. A lot of, I would say, it's one of the biggest changes where ease of doing business has become better for everyone. The speed at which money is also moving around, because you don't need the
velocity of the money.
So you don't need the artificial lag in the system which is there, which used to be. And this being completely secure and has been working at the scale you're talking about is a reflection that, I think, and this will go leaps and bounds only. On the consumer side, right, one, in addition to the ease of doing it and all that, the second thing is the data which this is generating and allowing is allowing the consumer to get credit at a lower cost. Because if earlier it used to be similar pricing to everyone, but now with data being available that this is a person does XYZ transactions and is far more credit worthy, right? I think the ability of lot of intermediaries to come and lend to these spaces exist. And I think slowly it's a matter of fact that banks will also analyze this data even more and be able to take decisions for even the not so banked customers, in this is not the top 10-20%.
0% EMI is the culture of the day now.
So the ability to deliver products relevant to a consumer and then designed for the consumer, I think comes with all this mechanism in play.
Great. Shailesh, another shift is the robust tax collection for Government of India. Especially we see the GST collections amounting to average 1.5 or 1.4 lakh crores a month in 2022, and with the coming full festive season and the first festive season post COVID, which could be an open season, like we can say, tax collection is bound to improve. So what are the views on your views on tax collection helping the economy in the next 5 years?
So tax has always been, the tax to GDP problem has always been an issue for the last 10-15 years, right? And GST also has been effectively, after implementation had 1 or 2 difficult years because either the economy slowed down or you were setting the process into play. But now it's working seamlessly, as is seen in the 1.5 lakh crore, the large collections you talk about. And it's very easy in the sense the line visibility for the government also in terms of what taxes are coming is very, very clear. And this is where the growth recovery has been moderate. And even, now you have growth normalizing, say, next 12 months, 18 months and becoming stronger. The collections obviously will follow the growth in the system and will improve. The good part is administratively also, it's a big benefit for companies. So the larger guys are able to adjust to it very comfortably. Then they are able to actually make sure that they are dealing with GST compliant suppliers. So the whole chain is getting cleaned up. And the scope for defective billings and all that, which was a norm in the 10-15 years back, actually is completely disappearing. So it has tightened up compliance. It's made it's tightened up compliance, improved visibility for the government, and also based on this data, some decisions can also be taken as to how to incentivize certain categories, how to adjust GST across. Otherwise,
maybe lower the taxes.
Lower the taxes also.
Yeah.
And the good part is it is working very, very seamlessly. So it's like there is no challenge as it used to be in the past. So all this is greater compliance.
Yeah, more the government earns, more it spends on the infrastructure. So
the
that
next
will
leg
also
is the visibility for the government improves.
Yes.
So I think the ability to reinvest in the next and create the 3-year, 5-year plans to be able to do it with greater certainty exists.
Great. All these things are good, but what are the risks an investor should be mindful of?
If you had spoken to me 3 months back, there certainly were risks, very significant risks, which was like, the start of the US problem, inflation, very high commodity prices. Commodity prices had gone berserk because of the war and all that. Now I think we are in a much better situation because most commodity prices have normalized. Wow. Even crude has normalized, but most other commodity prices, metals and all, come down significantly. India is very different from US and all. Our impact of commodity inflation is much higher here versus other developed countries. So for us, the benefit has been very significant of what has changed in the last 2 or 3 months. So that factor, which was possibly the biggest factor impacting our economic prospects for the next 12-18 months, I think is normalized. Great. So that's a very big thing. So the risk from there, which were emanating, have reduced. Oil still is a little sticky and higher, but I think we are pricing it well and passing it already to the consumer. So what's happening in other countries like in Bangladesh, where you have to take very sharp price increases, is not a situation. So we are not vulnerable like that. So that is one change which is there. Now coming to where the risk can emanate from. COVID has distorted some of the, I would say, income balances in India, where you have seen a mid-tier part of the economy or lower middle income economy certainly suffering a lot more. And there has been in that sense a context of income growth challenges which are there. Rural also has been a weak environment for some time now. So these are 2 areas which need to still be come out of their slower trajectory and maybe look better. Lastly, we are all talking about weak global growth because of what's there in US or UK talking about recession or whatever, a little bit of lower growth. So our expectations of high exports and that as an important driver for our growth should be tempered.
Great. Nice. This is a different perspective. What do you see the vision of India in the next 10 years, 1 decade, maybe 15 years later?
I think in every sector, every segment and every market, India is, I think, very, very, very young today, very emerging, even in sectors like mutual funds and all that, we talk about so much growth, so much size. The reality is only about less than 5% are possibly unique investors in mutual funds. So I think the journey has just begun. The good part is the foundations have been laid.
Great.
Had this journey happened without reforms, we will always have that, every 3 years the inflation used to kill us, we had to again slow down growth, and all the issues used to emerge. So I think the advantage is India is set at an early stage of its growth in many sectors, very strong, I would say, reform platforms.
Great.
And on that you can now expect reasonable growth to happen and sustain. So the good part is, given sectors are small today, very small in terms of where it is, income levels are rising in a large number of pockets of the market. I think you will find India possibly sustaining the current maybe 7%, 7.5% GDP growth rate for a meaningful period of time.
Wow, that's great.
Which in effect means that many new markets, like we talked about logistics, is just being born as an organized sector effectively. So imagine what kind of implications they can have for across industries.
Wow, yes.
So I think many sectors, India is still very young, very small. We see it so closely, we think it's very large, but you can just see from the context of where we can be.
Yes.
I think it's a long journey ahead.
Great. Finally, last question. Do you invest in mutual funds, or how do you invest?
See, a large part of our investments happen through mutual funds.
Great.
And in a regular SIP format.
Nice. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Shailesh ji.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shailesh ji, for being a part of Arthashastra Talks. All the best to you, and look forward to more such discussions in future.
Thank you so much, and best wishes to you all. Thank you.